Hello and welcome to the programme. So, EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini has endorsed Kyiv's plans for reforms and for achieving peace. She expressed her support after a meeting in Luxembourg with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Vadym Prystayko. Prystayko also met with foreign ministers of other EU member states. They discussed sanctions against Russia and steps taken towards Ukraine's European integration. And I'm pleased to say, to talk more about this, we are joined in the studio today by Miklosh. He's the chairman of the Strategic Advisory Group for supporting Ukrainian reforms. Hi, thank you so much for coming in. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So before we start talking about these reforms and the EU's policy towards Ukraine, whether it's changing or not, it'd be good to hear from Federica Mogherini. So let's listen now.
He reconfirmed to him, and obviously through him to all the Ukrainian people, the European Union's strong determination to support Ukraine, its sovereignty, its territorial integrity, our non-recognition policy of the illegal annexation of Crimea and Sebastopol, and even, or as important than that, our determination to continue to fully support Ukraine's reform agenda.
There we go. So that was Federica Mogherini speaking in Luxembourg. And I noted when I was listening to that, she used all the key phrases, the determination, sovereignty, territorial integrity is something we've heard over at least the past 5 or 6 years now. So in your view, if you look at this in a big sort of full context, what do you think of the practical support that the EU is giving now? Has it changed since Zelensky came into office, and is it enough?
I don't think that it was changed in principle, but I think that the European Union is giving significant support to Ukraine. It is clear from many areas in the accession process, in the technical advisory. European Union has special group for supporting Ukraine and Ukrainian reforms, which is for the first time in the Ukrainian history. As I know, European Union doesn't have something similar for any other.
Well, I think it's the largest.
Country.
I think since 2014, it was about 15 billion euros. So it's a huge amount. Really.
It is really huge amount of money. Not only money. Sanctions against Russia and firm position regarding annexation of Crimea or conflict in eastern Ukraine is clear. Of course, there are some tensions or some pressure from some particular countries because some business people who want to do more business with Russia are pushing and so on and so on. But still, I think that finally we see good result in strong and important support to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And because new government, the new president, new authorities, Ukrainian authorities are declaring, and I think they will do as well, even more reforms and quicker reforms, and they want still the priority is to integrate Ukraine to European Union and NATO. I think nothing was changed in this regard. In comparison with previous government. Yeah. What hopefully will be changed now, hopefully reforms will be even quicker than they were before.
Okay, and why do you think that?
Because I see why. There are more reasons for this. Firstly, we have very young, very ambitious government with very, really radical and ambitious programs, especially regarding economic reforms. We have stronger support and unity between president, parliament and government, also because after elections we have one-party government. Yeah. Because one of the reasons, not only during the last 5 years, but even in longer term, after Ukraine became independent party, it was really big problem because of this division of executive power between president and government, and because very low support, insufficient support for the government legislative proposals in the parliament.
But some might say that gives the president too much power. Is that a fair argument?
Yeah, because argument was that on one side, this division of power was reason for very slow reforms. On other side, yeah, it was kind of insurance against kind of accumulating power in one hand, which means, yeah, of course, this risk is there. Hopefully, it will be not misused, but it will be used for speeding up necessary reforms.
Do you think there is an incentive for the Ukrainian government and for the Ukrainian state institutions to actually drive these reforms? Because as far as I'm aware, the support from the European Union is very loosely based on the progress of these reforms.
Yeah. Look, there is one significant reason why Ukraine is so behind the countries like Poland or Czech Republic or Slovakia, which with 30 years they were very comparable in economic development. And this reason is the lack of reforms and lack of EU integration and NATO membership. Yeah? We have seen during the last 5 years progress. For the first time in history, system was changing and there were reforms. But now we see that these reforms the reform process will be even speeded up significantly. If we look at what is the program of the government is correct from point of view, from my experience, from point of view, what is the most important preconditions for speeding up economic reforms and achieving high and sustainable economic growth. And this program is very ambitious, to have 5% growth in first year and then 7% each other yearly.
Do you think that's realistic? Because a lot of businesses will be looking at that and thinking, is that possible?
Exactly. It is realistic, but it is realistic only if some preconditions will be fulfilled. Firstly, it has to be done what is written, I think, very correctly in the program of the government. It is necessary to attract investment. Without investment, it will be simply impossible. There are empirical evidences that if country wants to have sustainable growth higher than 6% yearly, a rate of investment to GDP has to be more than 25%. Today in Ukraine it is about 18%, which means we need 28. In Ukrainian conditions it means $10 billion yearly more. Which means it corresponds with the goal of the government to have FDI, foreign direct investment, $50 billion during 5 years. But for this, rule of law and property right protection is necessary, privatization, moratorium, cancelling moratorium for the land, to doing all these reforms. And another precondition, which is not in the hands of Ukrainian authorities, is global economic situation. Which means,
and this is very important, actually.
It is very important, which means we don't know if there will be recession in the global economy. Then, of course, it will be impossible to achieve this. But hopefully, it will be not. And then, if it will be good external environment, and if government and parliament and authorities will do everything what they declared, then this goal can be realistic.
Do you think that the European Union finds itself in quite a difficult situation, certainly the leaders of the European Union, because on the one hand, as we heard from Federica Mogherini, there is support for these sanctions, especially over Crimea, over the Donbass, but at the same time, we have Russian projects like Nord Stream 2, which is practically done. Probably in a few years it will be ready, and there's only, I think, Denmark, if I'm not mistaken, that's standing in the way of this project right now. There's a lot of business that's still done between the European Union and Russia, despite sanctions. So if you were advising the Ukrainian government, how would you handle this sort of dilemma, this split in the European Union between maintaining these sanctions but also doing business with Russia at the same time?
I don't think it is kind of contradiction. It is, of course, from point of view of one concrete, important, but one big commercial project. Which means we are speaking about one big commercial project and about overall policy regarding sanctions, which is much broader, much more complex. And as you know, sanctions have been approved as temporary, and they are prolonging in consensus of whole European Union. This first point. Second point, regarding Nord Stream, there is much wider opposition against Nord Stream. Not only Denmark, but Denmark has effectively right to complicate because it's going through their territory. But for instance, also Poland and Slovakia and other countries are opposing. But important also is that, yes, it seems to be that Nord Stream, despite of this, even US is opposing. Despite of this, Nord Stream will be finished. But at the same time, Angela Merkel is arguing that it will be necessary to have agreement, and EU, including Germany, will push to Russians to have new long-term contract for the transit of the oil and gas from Russia through Ukraine, Slovakia, and other countries. Which means I hope that it will be finally agreed. There are now ongoing negotiations regarding this. And I hope finally Nord Stream will not have as consequence that no gas or oil will go through Ukraine.
Yeah, and I guess it's all a question of capacity, really, at the end of the day, and price.
Yeah.
Not just in Ukraine, but globally as well. I know you just mentioned a few minutes ago about the different reforms that need to be held to be taken place before Ukraine can achieve this economic growth of 5 or 7%. What are the most crucial reforms, do you think, at the moment? What do you think people who are perhaps watching this programme, business people, what are they looking for most crucially to be done first?
Firstly, it is necessary to sustain what was achieved, especially macro stabilization, banking sector cleaning, independence of the national bank. And for instance, in this regard, also the story of private bank is very important.
Yeah.
And then cooperation with the IMF, because cooperation with the IMF is very, very important. It is signal. It is sending. They're not only about money, which Ukraine will receive in better price, but it is signal, especially signal for investors, potential investors. That yes, Ukraine is continuing. It is possible. Trust the environment.
Because actually, the most recent, sorry to interrupt, but the most recent delegation from the IMF who came to Ukraine pretty much left empty-handed. I read before the interview that the Ukrainian delegation is now going to the US. How do you foresee that happening? What
IMF is needed is to clear signal from the Ukrainian authorities that neither a private bank will be returned to the previous owners, nor compensation will be paid to them. This is important because if return of the bank or paying compensation, it will be clear evidence that the policy, a reform policy, independence of the national bank, cleaning of the banking sector, which private bank was the biggest one and the most important, is revoking, and it could be very, very bad signal. And then reforms, which you ask, which kind of reforms are of the key importance. It is important, key importance, because in Ukraine we need reforms in every area.
Well, exactly.
But the most important, systemically important, is and on the first place is law enforcement and property right protection. Also the most complicated reform, but the most important. Then it is privatization of the big companies, also not only of small companies, which is going on. Then it is land market and cancelling moratorium on land, on selling land. Then it is demonopolization of the energy sector. These, in my opinion, are the most important areas. If there will be progress in these 4 or 5 areas, then we can expect really significant influx of the foreign direct investment.
Perfect. Well, on that note, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for coming to our studio. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Ivan Miklosh. He's the chairman of the Strategic Advisory Group for supporting Ukrainian reforms. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more here on UATV.